Hi, everyone. I am honored to be the pastor that introduces the first chapter of the Gospel of Luke. And I'm sorry I laughed a little bit, but this is like the fifth time I've tried to say that. Anyway, it's almost universally accepted that Luke the physician wrote the Gospel of Luke. Not only Luke, but also the book of Acts. And he wrote the Gospel of Luke around 62 AD, 30 or 40 years after the death and resurrection of Jesus. Luke addresses this gospel to a man named Theophilus. And there's no reason for us to believe that Theophilus was not a real person. Some people have tried to say that maybe he wasn't, but there's no reason not to believe that he wasn't a real person. Now, Luke addresses Theophilus by saying, "Most excellent Theophilus." Now, this is interesting to me because that is the same words that the Apostle Paul used to address two Roman governors, Festus and Felix, in Acts chapter 23 and Acts chapter 24. So this Theophilus was probably a man of stature, of wealth, an important person. And he may have been the person who bankrolled Luke's ability to do this, because Luke had to go do research, interview eyewitnesses. So he might have been the one who helped support Luke to do this. The fact that most of this material in this gospel was gotten from eyewitnesses tells his readers, assures his readers, that what they've been taught up to this point was actually true. Anyway, in chapter 1, Luke introduces us to a priest by the name of Zechariah and his wife Elizabeth. And Luke tells us that they were unable to have children, which was really a bad thing, a tragedy. It was considered a tragedy at this time. Anyway, while serving in Jerusalem, Zacharias, who was a priest, was chosen to burn incense at the altar of incense. While doing this, the angel Gabriel appeared to him. And of course, the first thing that the angel said to Zechariah was, "Don't be afraid. There isn't a person sitting in this room, there's three of us here, or any of you who wouldn't be a little unnerved if all of a sudden an angel showed up." So the angel Gabriel tells Zechariah that his prayers, he and Elizabeth's prayers have been answered. They're going to have a son. And his son is to be named John, and that John was going to be the forerunner. He's going to prepare the way for the Messiah. Zechariah doubts Gabriel, doubts his word. And so Gabriel said that he's not going to be able to speak or hear until his son is born. Now, most of you are probably thinking, I remember that he couldn't speak, but I don't remember that he couldn't hear. But just hold that thought, and we'll come back to that in a minute. But anyway, this whole narrative about Zechariah reminds me that when God says something, when God promises something, and we don't believe him, there are consequences. Unbelief has consequences. Because usually when you don't trust or believe in God, you take things into your own hands and do it your own way. And of course, it creates a mess. And then not only that, but you miss out on the blessings or what God had planned in that situation. Anyway, at the end of this chapter, John is born to Zechariah and Elizabeth. On the 8th day, they circumcise John. And at that point, Zechariah is given the ability to speak and hear again. And if you read that section carefully, you will see that they were signing to John. In other words, he couldn't hear. They were signing to him so he could understand what they were trying to communicate to him. All right, in verse 26, Luke gives us the account of Gabriel visiting the Virgin Mary and telling her that she is going to give birth to a son. She was to name him Jesus, and he was going to be the coming Messiah. And Mary responds, "How can this be? I'm a virgin." The angel tells her that the Spirit of God is going to overshadow her. In other words, the power of God was going to create conception within her womb. And what is Mary's response to this? What is her response to something that was far greater impossibility than Zachariah and Elizabeth having a son? She believes it. She accepts it. She submits to it. And what a great example of faith for you and I. She believed before there was evidence. She believed before she saw anything. She believed because God, through his angel, had said this is what's going to be. The angel tells her that nothing is impossible with God, and she believes it. If the first chapter of Luke says anything to you and I, anything, it's that no matter the circumstance you may find yourself in today, no matter how bleak, if God has promised you something in his word about the situation or the future, you need to believe it. If you believe it, it'll come to pass. I personally am challenged by Mary's faith. I want to have the same kind of faith. I want to have the same kind of response to my life's situations. I want to believe God. I want to trust God. No matter what circumstance you may find yourself in this morning, no matter how bleak, no matter how impossible, trust in God and his promises. God is not going to fail you. Now, when Mary visited Elizabeth, after the angel Gabriel told her she was going to have a son miraculously, name him Jesus, she goes and visits her relative Elizabeth. And this is what Elizabeth said in verse 45. Blessed is she, Mary, who believed that there would be a fulfillment of what was spoken to her from the Lord. In other words, because she had faith to believe. Today, I believe God is speaking to many right now about a situation in your life, a present situation, maybe something even in your future. Guys, take hold of God's word. Trust God in his word. Let Jesus take that burden off of you. I want to challenge you, live today as if God had already given you victory over this situation. Live in such a way that as if it had already happened. God had already answered your prayer. He'd already given you deliverance. He'd already given you the provision for what you need. God has promised it. It's going to happen. Guys, God is always faithful to his word, and that's what this first chapter of Luke says to me. God bless you. Adios.